Yeah, I'll be right back. I'll tell the rest.
Yeah, I've got
I can't read that to you.
a group of Panchos and Pedros that are cutting grapes this morning, so
I can see.
I'm sure they'll be sweating before the day's over.
I really do.
Yes.
Almost 90. It is supposed to be like the last day of summer.
Yes.
Celebrate.
The last day of what?
Summer. That's what they said on the radio this morning anyway.
It is. So what are we looking forward to tomorrow? What's gonna happen?
Well, the leaves have already started changing.
Yes, he said it the other day.
Yeah.
The autumn equinox.
Autumn equinox, which means we have what?
You're good.
Day length will be equal.
Right. That's supposed to occur at 4:02 tomorrow. What is the significance of that 4:02?
Is that exactly when the weather starts to cool off? Or when the sun is over the equator?
Yeah, but why? But why?
It might be.
Okay, because of the tilt in the Earth's atmosphere, the sun has been directing its rays on the northern hemisphere during our summer. That's made our temperatures go up, like what we're talking about today for a high 87. At 4:02 on tomorrow, the sun will recede to the point that it is directly over the equator for a period of time. You got it, didn't you? So, what happens then, it will begin its descent into focusing the more direct rays on the southern hemisphere, which will begin to give them, their spring and their summer following that. So, it's a little mystical in a way, but yet there is science to back up everything that we talk about with this sort of stuff. So, but the solar radiation is going to be actually more intense. It'll be at its highest point tomorrow because of that direct irradiation coming right straight down on us. So that's what we're talking about. The tilt in the Earth that towards or away from the sun is a contributory factor in our seasons. It's one of the things that we recognize and deal with. So, it's actually a tilt of 14.5 degrees is the actual measurement, let's say.
Should we know that?
Do what?
Should we know that for the test?
Nah. You need to know it tilts. But as far as that particular measurement, no, I don't care.
Okay.
I want you to understand the theory and the reasons why these things occur. But as far as being specific to those numbers, it's immaterial to me.
Okay.
Okay. Good question, though. I would like for you to know that the equinox is a situation where we have equal day and equal night, 12 hours each way. And that occurs twice a year, in the spring and the fall. And that's the point at which the Earth crosses the equator when it's directly over the equator as this tilt changes. All right. As we're talking about that and discussing it, the tilt that occurs has a major effect on plant growth. The majority of our plant growth occurs in our spring and summer and early fall, where in the southern hemisphere, it's going to be in their spring, summer, and early fall, but that's the opposite seasons from what we have. Does that make sense to you? You know, if any of you are baseball fans, for example, baseball is played here during the late spring and summer. The rookie ball and rookie teams that play that they're trying to develop, once the season's over here, those guys don't go to sleep and sit down. They go to the southern hemisphere and play during their late spring and summer to actually be playing ball 24 or 12 months a year. So, they use that effect. And the same thing with plants. One of the reasons that we did the grocery search was to try to make you aware of crops that were grown and be available for sale during this season of the year. And had we done that in the spring, more than likely you would have been able to get the same list of commodities, but that country of origin would have been different. It's going to be, instead of the northern hemisphere of the United States and the southern part of Canada and things of that type, you're going to be dealing with Chile, South America, and those types of countries, Australia. So, the seasons, we're in a world market now. You can go to the grocery store and buy green beans any time of the year. You can go and buy peaches any time of the year. Because of this world market that we exist and the difference in seasons that the different products are produced and available. So there is some production of fruit or vegetables primarily in greenhouse situations. There's a lot of tomatoes and peppers that grow during the colder months. In southern Canada, there's a huge greenhouse and pepper production that is based in the southern part of Canada. And they have to use supplemental lighting up there to get those particular commodities or plants to have enough day length to produce a crop. But we'll have hydroponic tomato production starting probably in December, and it'll carry us through our winter and in early spring. But those hydroponic tomatoes are coming out of Michigan and southern part of Canada. So, they're using what they call a high intensity discharge light to increase the light to make those plants productive. Those are lights that produce a lot of heat, and they're expensive to run. So a lot of that greenhouse production has changed their lighting to use LED lights. We used LEDs in this lettuce experiment that we did here several years ago. But in doing that, all LEDs are not created equal. All lights are not created equal. We're in a classroom here that has a bank of fluorescent lights. And the light spectrum from those lights is not the ideal spectrum for plant growth. Like I said on Tuesday, the spectrum that is most advantageous for plant growth is what we call the photosynthetically active range, which is between 400 and 700 nanometers. And that contains primarily the blues and the reds that are in that spectrum. Plants need those particular wavelengths. And when we're looking at a light, you can't tell, like what we're looking at. It's white light. You don't recognize that there's blue and red there. We spent quite a bit of time researching it and trying to come up with lights to use for this lettuce project that we did, because we were doing it in an old darkened building, an abandoned manufacturing building, and it was dark, so we had to do supplemental lighting, but that's what we were trying to test. And in doing it, we I could buy commercially prepared grow lights. And the interesting thing about that, when you went to research or looking for the grow lights, most every light or light manufacturing company that you would source out using the internet and different resources would talk about how effective these lights were for the closet growth of a hemp plant. Does that mean anything to any of you, what we're talking about with the closet growth of a hemp plant? What are we talking about?
Possibly means you might be growing it in your closet because you're nervous of blue lights.
Yeah, but what you understand what I'm talking about with the hemp? I'm not talking about the hemp that's used to make rope.
You growing that Cali Kush, man.
Yeah, it's the private enterprise growing cannabis, and every ad that you came to, that was what they were doing, because that was the greatest demand. They were focusing on that. Back before LEDs became the prominent light source for things, that was the mechanism that the narcs and the feds and the local police would use to track down these grow operations in facilities. They would evaluate their electricity usage and then use infrared cameras to see how many lights were growing in a given building. Well, with the use of LED lights, that's totally changed. They are low electrical demand. They don't give off any heat. And if you're trying to build a bank of lights, you can actually resource it and find particular bulbs that will give you light in the spectrum that you need. So we actually built several light panels. We used something basically like a piece of pegboard and put the lights in, silicone them in, and then tied them together. And we had to use a transformer power source to power the thing. But we made a 4x8 panel that we put over a table to illuminate it, to begin to grow one of the levels of lettuce that we were doing. It was interesting.
Which Philips is making tunable LED bulbs. They're called the Hue bulbs. They've got like 256 million different colors that you can set it with, and you can set them automatically. You can have them adjust. They're smart light bulbs. They connect to Wi-Fi, and you can have them adjust to like sunrise, sunset, and all this kind of stuff. You can actually adjust them with your smartphone app or a computer or that kind of stuff. And they're not as expensive as you might think. I mean, he's talking about a 4x8 bank. How many bulbs did you have in that 4x8 light bank?
Don't remember exactly, but somewhere between 900 and 1,000.
Okay, which they work in a regular light bulb base, just like in a lamp. So you wouldn't have to use anywhere near that many, I would guess, for these, but they're tunable. If you just, dare I say, if you're growing a couple of plants in your closet kind of thing, you can just get the Hue bulb and control it with your smartphone app and get the perfect wavelength and roll with it.
Yeah, and the technology, when we did this, it was about three and a half years ago, I guess. And the technology's totally, changed since that time because of I had to order the bulbs from an outfit in California, and it turns out they were bringing them in out of Japan. So I've still got a box or two of them in the office. It's the point I'm trying to make is that photosynthesis is very specific to the wavelengths at which they respond to light. So it's LEDs are something that we're going to see. They're going to take over the majority of our illumination. I actually found we used another treatment that we were using tubes, like a fluorescent tube. We actually used a fluorescent fixture. We took the transformer out of it, and we found an LED tube that fit into that fixture. and it was another treatment that we did. That one, we couldn't get enough illumination out of it. We couldn't get the foot candles that we needed, so those plants tended to be kind of spindly compared to the commercially prepared lights that we did and the one that we made. But you know, it was an interesting project. We discovered that you could grow lettuce in this room totally dark. You could probably have 10 or 12 shelving units we used a gutter, just a plastic gutter that you buy at Lowe's, and filled it with vermiculite and perlite, and put them on an angle where we would water the top one, and that it would water that gutter, and then it would go down and drip into the one below it. We did it like a stair step. We used 4 or 5 gutters in a particular shelving unit to gain the volume of material that we needed to do. But we could grow as much lettuce in a room as you could on about a 1/10 of an acre of land, and we could crop that 24 times a year, where that acre of land you could only theoretically crop it twice. So it would be a highly productive type of thing. And there's commercial production of this all the time, and it's growing. It's one of the greater opportunities that exist for niche type crops. It's totally organic. You don't have any spray material. You don't have any contamination. Works really well for tender greens going into high-end restaurants that want to go with a very elite type of salad production. So it works real well. As we talk about that, we need to have an awareness of some terminology, and we've got to recognize that plants are what we call photoperiodic, and the response to a photoperiodic type of plant is photoperiodism. In this discussion, we recognize that we have plants that prefer long days, and as opposed to that, we have plants that prefer short days. And by the designation of long day or short day, what that means is that they are triggered to flower by differences in day length. An example of a short day plant that most all of you would be aware of is the poinsettia. They are, that red or pink or white bract flower that you normally see around Christmas time. But those are triggered to bloom by the initiation of a short day. And as we were talking about, starting tomorrow, our days are going to get a little shorter and shorter. But if poinsettias were left alone to be triggered on their own, they wouldn't flower until about the 1st of February. So commercial producers of poinsettias artificially change the day length of those to make sure that they have begun to flower between Thanksgiving and Christmas to be available for the holiday season. And how would you imagine that they would artificially alter their day length?
I'm guessing stick them in a room where they control the amount of light present.
Everybody hear what Tyler said?
Yes.
Okay. All right, you've got 10,000 poinsettias in a greenhouse. What kind of room are you going to put those in, Tyler?
You're probably going to put them in a warehouse.
No, what they do, they don't move them, but they have actually blackout curtains that they will pull over them at a given point in the day. Right. And that's done automatically through mechanization to reduce the amount of illumination they get. I forget, it seems to me like it's between 6 and 7 hours of daylight that they like, and the rest of that darkened. If you've got a poinsettia at home that you may have carried over from last Christmas, some people do that. That's a challenge for them. How would you would trigger that poinsettia by doing what you just said. Put it in a darkened room. You can put it in a closet. But you need to do it every day for a period of time, starting about the middle of October to be able to initiate that. And that's what we call a short day plant. There are other plants that are long day plants that once you reach a critical length of day, longer than 12 hours, it triggers them to begin to flower. So, you know, that's just one of the specific things that our ecological system contributes to plant production. Taller vegetation. We talked a little bit about tropical forests. Even our deciduous forests that we have. If you've got an area where you've got, we're getting a strange bleed over of noise, Tom. I don't know what it is.
I don't know either. I thought it was on your end, somebody working outside y'all's window, but
I thought I saw.
No, we're fairly quiet. It sounds like somebody's filing their nails or something. I don't know.
it sounded like somebody with a grinder grinding on some rebar, but softly. And it just,
Okay. All
but
right. Talking about shading and things of that type, if you are in a situation where you've got a full canopy, heavy wooded area,
Yeah.
whether it be an oak or a pine or whatever, that shaded or that canopy is going to create a situation on the floor of that timber that reduces plant populations because of the shading. The canopy prohibits the light reaching the ground, and that in turn inhibits germination of a lot of plants. I'm sure all of you have seen areas that have been timbered or cut over, whether it be an oak or a pine forest. They'll go in and clear cut it. What happens to that? Say they clear cut it this summer. What's going to happen to that next summer? What's it going to look like?
Grow up.
It's going to grow up. You'll get some regrowth of small, trees and bushes and shrubs, but you'll get an enormous amount of, weeds and blackberry and things of that type that will germinate after that light reaches the floor of that previously wooded area. So, that type of plant is, or in that shaded area, is called a shade avoidance response. So that's what we're talking about with that. There is another term that is listed here that you need to be aware of. Does the term photomorphogenesis mean anything to anybody? What's it mean?
Plant shape determined by light quality, particularly through relative amounts of red, far red, and blue light.
You found it in a book. That's good.
I did.
so what's it
All
mean?
right. Put it into practical terms.
Does that
Do
mean
you have
shape,
experience with photomorphogenesis?
does that mean that the plant shape changes by different wavelengths of light, or like different colors of light?
You're being a little more specific than I really intended, but yes, that's right. is that the plant shape is adjusted because of light. Any of you got any house plants? In plants in your house? Your parents? You? Anybody?
Yes, sir.
All right. Where do they? In what direction do they grow?
Toward the light and have to be rotated.
Toward the light. That's right. So if you're wanting that plant to continue to be upright, what do you do to it?
Turn it a quarter turn on a regular basis.
There you go. That is a response to photomorphogenesis. That's exactly what that is. And that whole process is dictated by a light-absorbing protein called phytochrome. There was an article in the local paper here, I believe, I don't remember whether it was last Sunday or the Sunday before, talking about a 35-acre field of plants that were photomorphogenic. What am I speaking of? Got any idea?
Perhaps.
Sunflower. Tyler hit it. Sunflowers. Yeah. This guy's got a 35-acre field of yellow sunflowers.
Is that the one that we passed by last Friday?
That is the one we passed by on our way to our lab. Yes.
Sunflowers.
So those plants are definitely photomorphogenic because those flowers always turn towards the sun.
What's the average lifespan of the sunflower?
What do you mean the average? They're annuals.
Oh, so it won't just grow up, spit out some seeds, and then die.
That's what it will do. Yeah.
Oh, that's what it does?
It's an annual. That means it germinated during this season, and it will produce seeds, and it will die during this season. That's an annual.
Grow back up next year?
No, not unless there's seeds that are put back now. And that article said that he was growing those. They were black oil sunflower seeds, and they're growing for bird seed. But that's and in years past, I know they grow a lot of sunflowers, particularly up in the northern part of the Midwest. That's the first ones I've ever seen grown in this area. But I think they're probably more of them being grown because they are a viable commodity for sale, whether it be for bird seed or for the oil. We talked about that being an oil type production.
People eating the seeds nowadays.
There's some of that. There's enough seeds in that field to keep several baseball teams going for a while. But anyway, but phytochrome is the light-absorbing protein that determines that photomorphogenesis.
I have a question on that. You mentioned that the sunflowers were a response of photomorphogenesis, and I did kind of cheat and look this up in the glossary to confirm what I was thinking, but isn't that usually termed phototrophism, and what is the difference? Photomorphogenesis, in the book, it mentions phytochrome being the protein, whereas I've always heard phototrophism is where the sun destroys the auxins. So,
you're correct in both situations, and I guess I may have used the sunflower as an example when it really wasn't proper, because we saw those the other day, and that was a graphic example that you could see. But yeah, you're right. And phototropism is again a light response, but it's a different cause. You're exactly right. Yeah. Don't mean to confuse you, but that's a good catch. I'm glad you did it. That's fine. We hadn't got to phototropism in this section yet, so, but that's you're right. Does that clarify for you?
yes, sir. I was just making sure in my mind whether phototrophism was classified as a type of photomorphogenesis or whether they were completely separate.
It is a type of it, and And you get into gray zones with some of these things with definition as to cause and effect. I think that you're going to have the phytochrome that is a contributory factor, but also you're going to get that degradation of the oxygen. And that's getting into a lot of plant physiology, and sometimes I kind of draw a line so I don't get into too much physiology with this introductory class. You can get elbow deep in physiology and just get overwhelmed, and that's not my intention. Okay, but you're absolutely right, and that's I appreciate you bringing that up. That basically sort of summarizes what's in this chapter talking about light. So we now step into the puddle. We begin to talking about moisture. Saw on the local news this morning, one of the weather forecasters said that we were about 7 inches below normal in rainfall for the past 90 days in our area. Do you feel like you guys are below normal in rainfall at this point in the year? We had an extremely wet spring and early summer. It was really wet. We got a lot of heavy rain, and we had a lot of rain, throughout the week. We would get a lot of rain. And I'm kind of selfish, with the production of grapes that we do. It's good to have rain early, but when grapes begin to mature, I need for it to be dry because of the incidence of disease and trying to harvest those little bags of sugar water that are on a bunch of grapes. They don't do well under moist, warm conditions. So what we've had for this season has been extremely warm and wet early, and then we've been warm and dry for the last 3 or 4 months, 3 months anyway. And that's been good for our particular crop. It's good for most of the crops in our area have done reasonably well. But moisture availability is key to all plant production. It says nearly 97.6% of the world's water is in oceans. And before we began to get climate change, 2.1% of it was frozen. And it says that groundwater accounts for 0.3 or 0.3% of the world's water, and only 1/100th exists in fresh water in lakes and streams. And then it says 0.001% of it is present in the atmosphere. And these are numbers that I never think about. I don't. It's not something I worry about. But now the folks in Peru and in Houston and in the Florida Keys can testify that water's been a major problem in changing their lives in the last 2 weeks because of the flooding and things that have come out of this hurricane. These hurricanes and everything that is going on right now, as far as the water, is a component of the hydrological cycle, and all of that is driven by the sun and solar energy. The hydrological cycle is the global cycle in which water is evaporated, precipitated, transpirized over the entire world. Your textbook's got a photo or a graph, or picture, whatever depiction of the hydrological cycle. And it's not something that you're going to think about on a daily basis unless you're tuned into the weather and crop production. But what actually happens is outlined pretty well in that. But it also has some terms that we're going to talk about as we move along through the next class or two. We'll talk about condensation. We're going to talk about precipitation, evaporation. We're going to talk about groundwater. And these are all different ways that water is changed and moved. Talk about runoff. We'll get, say we may get a tropical storm here in our area, a period of heavy thunderstorms. We may get 3 or 4 inches of rain in Patrick and Henry County. Take that for example. We get that much over a short period of time, and the water that comes down is going to actually run off. It's going to come off the slopes of land that we've got here and go into either the Dan River or the Roanoke River, which are all tributaries that are going to flow down through the area at Southside. And quite often we'll get 2 or 3 days of heavy rain, and then I'll hear that it's flooding in South Boston, flooding in Danville, Riverdale, because of that runoff that goes into those streams. Have y'all ever affected? I know, Tom, you probably had to alter your route of travel because of high water at times as you drove down there, haven't you?
Oh yeah, several times. Several times a year, actually.
Okay.
Luckily, they're like working on a couple of the bridges I have to go through, but Mandy may remember, what was it, back in like March when South Boston was like flooded completely out for like 2 days.
Oh yeah, it was longer than 2 days.
Yeah, well, it was 2 days of my commute, and then it went on into the weekend, and I had to do a probably 20-mile detour to cover 3 miles worth of ground that I would have done on 58. Just that's how far out of the way we had to go.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, that river flat out crested, and it was flooded a quarter of a mile, half a mile away from the river. It was underwater.
Yeah, and that's why that little village there, the suburb of South Boston, is called Riverdale, because of that, because of that water. And that water that you guys were burdened with, the majority of it came out of our area. It's flowing downhill. That's part of the hydrological cycle that we're talking about. And all of that rain was a result of precipitation. That was a result of condensation. That was a result of transpiration. So, we're going to make sure we understand those particular terms. Are any of you comfortable with using them right now? If we're talking about precipitation, condensation, transpiration, all of you comfortable with those, or do I need to spend a minute or two going over?
I believe
Tyler's good.
we have some idea.
Okay, well, that's fine. We'll briefly hit them when we get started next time. We're about to use up our time, but one thing that sometimes people, we may know what they are, have an idea what they are, but one of the ones that is most involved with plant growth is the term transpiration. That's transpiring, is the process of transpiring. And plants do that as long as they have adequate moisture. Plants will emit, there'll be moisture taken up by the roots, and it's percolated up through their phloem and xylem, and it goes out into their leaf structures, and then it is actually emitted through their stomates.
Do you also shorten that for stoma? Will you accept the word stoma?
Yes, ma'am, anytime.
Cool.
Stomata is a single and stomate is a plural.
Yeah.
A leaf is going to have a lot of them. in most cases. Some plants vary, only have them on the bottom, some have them on the bottom and the top. But they are little pores that enable gas exchange from the plant to the outside world. And in doing that, they also give off some moisture. And that stomata giving off the moisture through the process of transpiration helps control the temperature of plants. So it's just like me, you know, I'm an old fat guy and I don't like it when it gets warm and I perspire. And the plant transpires where I perspire. But it's just basically the same type of function. My body's trying to cool me off by the perspiration that's coming through my perspiration, and it creates evaporation. The plant is doing the same thing, transpiring or giving off moisture to keep it cooler. And oops, we're out of time. I didn't realize it. Okay, we'll pick up, talk about moisture some more on next week. And you guys have a nice weekend. Stay cool. It's going to be warm all weekend, I think. So
Okay.
avoid your evaporation and transpiration.
Yes. We're going camping, so we're gonna be evaporating and transpiring all weekend, except for 3.
Where are you going camping?
Right here at the Kerr Dam.
Okay. That's good.
We've never actually been camping out here, and I drive by it every day, so my wife got inspired.
Well, I'm gonna camp in my recliner when I get some of my tasks done. So.
Yeah, that's my ideal form of camping. But
Yeah. Okay.
okay.
Thank